Hello and welcome to the sixth and final webinar in this series of webinars on transition, bringing together children's and adult services, the experience of an adult hospice. Before we go on to introduce Helen, who's kindly agreed to lead the session, just wanted to remind the group of the ground rules for webinars to maximise the quality of the call for yourselves. You'll notice that when you've joined the webinar, you'll be on mute. This is to eliminate any background noise. Please don't unmute yourself. You can probably hear sirens here. When Helen's presenting, we will mute ourselves. If you've got questions while Helen's speaking, do submit them via the chat facility and we'll try and keep a note of them. There will be time at the end of the session to ask Helen questions and to have a discussion. And just for your information, we are recording this webinar, and this, alongside the other 5 webinars, will be available for our website in the next few days. So, introductions. My name is Julia Hodgson, and I'm Project Manager here at Together for Short Lives. I'd like to introduce Helen, and Helen is the Young Adult Care and Transition Lead at St Elizabeth Hospice in Ipswich. I'm sure she'll introduce herself in a second. And finally, just to say thank you to the James Tudor Foundation, who funded this series of webinars for us. Without further ado, we're just going to hand over presentation rights to Helen, who will take us through her slides.
My name is Helen Finlinson. I'm the Young Adult Care Lead at St Elizabeth Hospice in Ipswich. We're an adult hospice, and I've been working in this current role for about 2 years now. I trained as an occupational therapist originally. I've worked at this hospice for nearly 11 years, previously as the day services manager, and as our services have developed, that I'll tell you about today, we have now created a dedicated role to young adult care and transition. I'm also the chair of the East of England Regional Action Group. So this is the map for the area that we cover over the East of England. Where I work at St Elizabeth, we actually only serve currently East Suffolk, which is quite a small area in comparison. And we work in partnership with each that actually covers a much bigger area within the East of England. And today I'm going to be talking about both our sort of work they've been doing in shared care, working closely with children's services to support transition for young adults with life-limiting, life-threatening conditions, but also touching on the relevance of our regional ambition for young adult care, which really aligns with the work of the Regional Action Group and the ambition we have together in partnership for the youth. So it's a hello from me, and also a hello from the young people and families that we work with in this area, who are really keen for people to know about their journeys and their experiences here. And so we'll draw on some of that as they form the reason and the basis for all our experience and why we're doing what we're doing. So today I want to share our journey as an adult hospice and just to talk about how we have formed some really vital partnerships and how we have discovered really that the key to success is the joint work of children's and adult services together, and hopefully by the end of this you'll know why we call it the 3-legged race. So a little bit of background on where we started. It was back in 2008 when we changed our CQC registration from 18 to 14, and we felt at that point that really did open the door to young people being able to start getting to know us before they needed to leave the children's hospice locally and the other children's services. And I think we discovered very early on, a couple of years into that after having no referrals whatsoever for under 18, that purely by saying you're welcome to come here and meet us as we are was just not going to work. It wasn't welcoming. We hadn't looked at ourselves enough to ask ourselves why young people didn't feel that we were the service for them, and we hadn't reached out enough. So we spent some time developing some really key partnerships with our local children's services, both the community children's team and our acute trust at the hospital nearby, and also the key relationship with the local children's hospice. And we've had to spend a long time, really, taking a step back and listening and learning from those, and recognising that, yes, we've got expertise as adult specialist care providers, but we also need to understand a great deal about where young people are coming from and what their needs are, what they may expect from us, and what they may need from us, and how we might need to change. And I think that has been the key, that paradigm shift, that actually we needed to be willing to change for young people and their families, and not just expect them to come and fit in with what we already do. And essentially, we have spent that time with young people and their families to make sure that our introductions to our service are pretty gentle, and that we don't set the time agenda, that we enable young people to work with us in their own time. And over time, we've recognised that actually, as an adult hospice, we need to create a model that's developmentally appropriate for young adults, but it is embedded in the adult hospice model. Throughout this, hopefully, you'll get the key message, really, of what we call the 3 E's. We have learned that, yes, we have got some fantastic specialist palliative care services to offer, and they are what we call our expertise. But unless we offer the right opportunities for engagement, and that we become welcoming and young adult friendly, we won't achieve that engagement. So we need that engagement first to get people over the threshold and be open to working and being supported by us. And secondly, when young people come and first start accessing the adult hospice service, we need to make sure that we get the experience right, that the service we offer is developmentally appropriate, the communication, the expectations, and the whole kind of feel of what young people and their families have when they come to us is the right experience. And only without those first 2 things, the right opportunities for engagement, the right experience when they come, will we actually get to deliver our expertise. So they're the 3 E's that is really the crux of everything we do each time we have a new development, and when we check in on ourselves to make sure that we're developing services according to young people and their families' needs. So our key partnerships, as I said, have been with the Children's Hospice and our local NHS services. And we have developed the shared care pathway. So between 14 and 19, we overlap and we work with those children's services to both be involved in the care of young people in transition. So we offer transition support, and we also offer parallel planning. So we're offering the opportunity for young people to hope for the best and plan for the worst, as we would say, help them to plan for aspirational living, look at their goals, very much embracing the pentagon of support, but also looking at making sure we're getting the right clinical support in place for if things don't go so well, and if there is deterioration or the need for symptom management, emergency care planning, end-of-life care during that transition phase. What's absolutely critical to the shared care partnership is what we would call that overlap. So us not waiting for children's services to stop before we start, and making sure that we work hand in hand, and that there is that overlap of time, so that both services from the children's and the adults end are involved with the young people and their family for a good quality period of time, so that during that overlap we work together, we learn from each other, we plan transition, and we have a really seamless approach to palliative care. So this is a little picture of our partnership team, and these are members of the Children's Hospice, ourselves, and the hospital team. And we've really built some great relationships over time, and I have to say that we do really feel like we are one team now rather than separate organisations. And I think for a lot of us, the work that we do together is probably some of the most enjoyable elements of our roles, and the opportunity to have that real sense of team that transcends our organisational boundaries. So this is an outline of our young adult service, which sits within, as I said, embedded within the adult hospice service. And I will touch on these and talk to you about the different elements and how they work as this presentation goes forward. But it's just to give you the outline, really, that this is what we consider as our dedicated young adult service. But obviously, young people and their families are entitled to access all of our adult services that we offer anybody as well. just wanting to highlight really that looking and reading over the research in transition over the last few years, that there is so much evidence that points to joint working, looking at the reasons why transition fails and the fact that there is these gaps in service, and that why there are negative experiences of transition. So much of that points to the fact that there needs to be much more of an overlap and a joining up of services. And I think for us as well, the fact we really weren't prepared to support appropriately the needs of young adults, that lack of preparation on our adult part was also a lack of joint working, and we've really learned that we are so much better prepared by overlapping and working together. I think also looking at the loss of services and support is really important. Whilst there's a greater overlap and a greater continuity of provision and that seamless transition, that can reduce some of the losses, and I'll touch on some of that later on as well. So just a little bit of a recall really of the well-known barriers to transition, and thinking about those in the context of why it's important to work together. And this is one of the studies by Kirk and Fraser from 2014 that does a really good job of summing these up really. So it talks about lack of preparation, lack of awareness of what adult services are available, that reluctance that young people and families can have to transition, that lack of joint working, lack of coordination, lack of information and choice, and lack of flexibility. And I think hopefully we'll be able to demonstrate that lots of the benefits of joint working really do tackle these barriers and can be the answer to the challenges that we face. We've also found that time has been the greatest opportunity through the overlap. Transition is meant to be a process, as it says here, rather than a transfer of care. And that actually with our shared care pathway of 14 to 19, we have 5 years to work really closely with children's services and children, young people and their families, to get to know them, to gear ourselves up, to get ourselves trained, competent and confident. And it is a wonderful opportunity to do that over that 5-year period with the support of the children's services, who have often known these families since birth or for a considerable length of time. So it's a wonderful opportunity to take up, to consider that overlap and the time that it gives us. And that's just from a professional perspective, but also for families, that it gives them that time to adjust, for young people to feel like they're not being rushed, and that they've got the time that they need to work their transition in a way that feels more positive. We also knew that the guidance points towards joint working. It's clear within the NICE transition guidelines that we should be working together. And I think the CQC from the Pond into the Sea report also highlights that too, that often it seems that services are not working together, that often everyone's got great intentions, but they're doing their own things and not working jointly. So I think what we're trying to talk about essentially is the gap. We know that the gap exists in transition. The gap can be all sorts of things in time, in expectation, in service, in practice. So one of the biggest challenges is to close that gap. And so through shared care and through joint working and overlap, you can actually bridge that gap and try and make the pathway from children to adult services a much more smooth and less often treacherous, stressful and sort of daunting one at that. So as an adult service, as I said at the beginning, one of the things we've really had to do is do a lot of listening and learning, and not just about our own service and what we could be for young people, but really understanding where young people have come from and how that may shape their expectations and their needs in the future, particularly within hospice care, because we know there are many barriers to the word hospice and people coming into hospice care anyway, but we have to really remember where people have come from. So we talk about the rearview mirror perspective as critical, really. So both in terms of that kind of overall models, but also in terms of local services, local service provision, knowing where people have come from, what they've been used to. So we know that, having looked at that, there are some really, really big differences between children's care and adults care. So this is very generic. The biggest being that there is no such equivalent of a paediatrician in adult care, and that care can often be a lot more fragmented, with different specialists taking a lead. And for those that lack a differential diagnosis, they may never have a lead consultant like they have had in paediatrics. So that can be a significant change in loss. And those young people in particular, they may now need to have much more involvement with their GP, so that hasn't really been available in practice before, because their default support has been their paediatrician within their children's service. And there's lots of other examples there of differences between children's and adult services, and also not forgetting the difference in models of care that's centred around the legal models of consent and decision making. And that can be one of the biggest challenges, I think, as an adult service, that we're always used to dealing with, working within the Mental Capacity Act, but dealing with the person rather than dealing with parents as decision makers. And needing to really understand how that's worked in practice in children's services, and how we start to travel that journey, particularly if we're working with a young person whose capacity is developing and possibly developing whilst deteriorating at the different ages of in transition. And there's also differences such as, there tends to be much bigger packages of care in children's services, smaller packages of care available, differences in criteria and things like the continuing care provision. And then also lastly, but certainly not least, the short break provision that's very well established in children's care and not recognised in adult care in the same way. It's much more known as respite, and it's for the benefit of the carer, not necessarily of the person needing the care themselves. And the difficulties that young adults face in adult care accessing short breaks, particularly if they've got complex needs. And then secondly, getting to know children's hospice models. So really looking at the fact that we know that the children's hospice and the adult hospice models have evolved in completely different philosophies. There are some core values that are the same and core skills around symptom management. But by nature of the demographics and the conditions being different, the models have evolved in very different ways. So obviously, children's hospice see a lot, thankfully, smaller number of children dying. Adult hospices see much more. I think in one of our comparisons, what our local children's hospice would experience dying within a year, probably what we would see at least within a week within the adult hospice. And we know that the conditions are very different, much more kind of chronic, life-threatening conditions within children's hospice care, and that there is a harder challenge really to predict prognosis. So services develop more around need. Some adult hospices are more developed around prognostic indicators around the time of entry into the adult hospice service, which is a really big challenge to gauge with a lot of young adult conditions, where the disease trajectory is much more unpredictable and less known, particularly for some of these conditions where the survivors of their generation. We also know that children's hospices typically have a much longer palliative care involvement as a result, and we are used to in adult services a much shorter palliative care involvement. We also know there's different priorities, including education, recreation, and short break provision. And I think one of the biggest learnings for us is that we had to understand that where young people have transitioned from, they're used to a lot higher staffing ratios, very common that it's 1-to-1, almost as an automatic doing care at the children's hospice. And for us at the adult hospice, that's almost unheard of unless there is a particularly high level need identified. And so that was a big adjustment, that we need to ensure that young people and their families are not just expecting exactly the same care ratios in the adults as well. So going back to the services that we developed together with children's services, and we started off by holding an open event together. That was our very first joint venture. And we realised that as much as we built these great relationships now with our children's colleagues, even though they were recommending us to young people and their families, people were still really hesitant to be referred, unsure about coming over to us and getting to know us. So we decided that we needed to tackle the Crossing the Threshold challenge by holding an open event that's at the adult hospice, but it's hosted with children's services. So the children's hospice and other children's service staff come and jointly run an event with us. And we've learned from what works at children's hospices family events, the type of activities and social events that young people and their families welcome. So we try to replicate what has been successful in children's services and then run it on the adult site. And partly that's to give people something that they're familiar with and help us to meet people where they are. And it really enables that kind of softer introduction and a chance to come and see us and ask about our service without committing to a referral. And also, we've generally found that enables people's myths to be dispelled, and lots of people realise that we're not what they thought we were going to be when they came to us. And what we always find now, we now run 2 a year. We run one in November. We have a fireworks evening event in our hospice garden, and then we have a summer event. So this year we're having a sports day family event. We always have referrals. So on average, we have 2 or 3 new families every event. And generally speaking, people say we'll be happy to refer, maybe not yet, but soon. Or some people are saying we'd love a referral straight away. And it also gives us the opportunity to talk with families and constantly, to always, listen and include the views of young people and their families on an ongoing basis. So we really get to hear from them what is it you think you'll need from us, and help to continuously get that feedback about how our service needs to evolve. We always have our current families as well attend the event. So they've become, initially, obviously, there were a lot more new families, and now we have our current families having a family event, fun day, and then other new families, when they come along, it's often really encouraging for them to hear from other people that have already engaged positively with our adult service, and they often really enjoy being reunited with those people who they've probably known in various worlds of education and the children's hospice. It's always very difficult, obviously, of confidentiality to reassure potential new referrals that they're going to know people when they come to the adult hospice. So this is our way of enabling those people to find out, actually, there's going to be people here that I know. They're going to be sort of re-linked up with their previous peers, both parents and young people. So that can be a really useful way of enabling people to have that reassurance. So following on from the open events, when I think we had 7 young people, we felt that we had enough to start a dedicated service. So we started what's become really our catalyst of our young adult service, our young adult group, that after about a year of running, we offered the young people a chance to name that group. So we did an evening where they kind of came up with all sorts of words and ideas and concepts of what it meant to them to have the young adult group. And so we came up with the name Exchange as a way of representing the fact that they all bring their own experiences, they come and exchange friendships, ideas, interests, and that it is a really important meeting place for them as young adults in transition. So we hold this group on a Tuesday evening, 4:30 to 7:30. We discovered from the young people that they would like something that they could come straight from school to, or college or work, that's in the evening and doesn't interfere with their daytime normal activities. It's also easier for parents as well to bring them after work, and if younger siblings are coming, that they can come after school, and so that seems to be a popular time. We always offer a annual programme which the young people put together themselves through feedback and ideas, and it's a mixture of being at the adult hospice and being out and about to different community venues for outings. We offer inclusive activities so that we can enable everyone to participate at whatever level they can. And there are lots of kind of social elements to it to help build peer support, as well as offering different experiences and fun activities. We have a lot of young people volunteer, so we've recruited young volunteers from schools and colleges locally, so they can volunteer 16 plus with us. and they bring with them that really relevant peer relationship really with the young people. And having young volunteers has really helped us because often if we've had a real diverse group of young people attending the group, particularly if you've got a large number of young people who are non-verbal, and then someone who else wants to perhaps communicate verbally, or different sort of developmental stages, having the young volunteers enables peer support, not just from each other as sort of patients, but also with the volunteers and other local young people. Young people can bring their own carers, and we encourage that if possible, just so we can help run the group and not limit numbers. Or some young people actually prefer to bring their own carers because they feel more confident receiving care from those that are more familiar to them, particularly if they're new to the service. The group is also an essential place for skill sharing. We run this group jointly with the Children's Hospice and Ipswich Hospital Children's Ward staff. So we share that with the 3 organisations staffing. And so it gives us a really great opportunity in the background to learn from our children's colleagues and to be trained up and shown and demonstrated different clinical skills, as well as some of the more individual person-centred care skills around individual young people as well. And what we've done, we really feel, because we've resourced this group between us, that we've created quite a sustainable support. So young people don't need to be discharged from this group. They can attend this group as long as they want to, and we can grow the staffing to support that. So a few little pictures of us here. We've been out sailing. We've had joke nights. That's the young people rating each other's jokes. And then we do lots of inclusive sports like bocce, which are incredibly popular in our gym. Amazed at how competitive young people are with each other. So there's always a competition or another on every time. We've also been out to the seafront. That's our annual event in August, which is popular with everyone involved. So the next part of our young adult service is our 6-monthly review. So we put these in place because, as I said before, it's really hard to predict sometimes the level of proactive support young adults need with their conditions that are less familiar to us at the adult hospice. So obviously, if they were the needs were changing or they needed more frequent intervention, they could be seen more frequently in outpatients or the community like any of our other adult patients. But we have alternate doctor or clinical nurse specialist 6-monthly reviews as a robust way of having clinical reviews, and also during transition, making sure that we're building up a picture and kind of establishing what the specialist palliative care agenda is going to be. It also gives us regular opportunities to review mental capacity assessments and any best interest decisions or meetings that need to be had. Obviously, we do that all the time, but it just gives us a regular check-in for that. Also helps us to monitor the transition support that might be needed. We're really conscious that we can't take that on as coordination, but we can help signpost and support during that process, during those reviews. It's also a place where we can build up rapport and offer advanced care planning as and when it's appropriate. We've also found the 6-monthly reviews have been really helpful for us as an adult service to start building up the picture of need, including things like additional training our clinical staff may need if that young person is going to need more care from us, either as an inpatient or the community, and also things like the equipment needs, identifying when we may need to, if someone was need to be admitted that they need a particular type of bed that we don't have as standard in the adult hospice, and then us being able to proactively, when we're not in a crisis admission situation, plan where we would hire that or source that type of equipment and have that all as a plan on standby. I think it's also helped us to unpack the complexity. One of the things we've discovered is that compared to a lot of our general population, a lot of the young adult needs have a lot more multiple complexities to unpack and understand and learn about, and so giving us regular reviews helps us to build up that picture and grow in our competence and confidence to support them. And I think most importantly, we found those regular reviews have enabled a lot of trust and rapport to build with young people and their parents. And one of our doctors see that recently was that that she felt without doing the regular reviews, some of the discussions that have now been initiated by young people and their parents around advanced care planning and even sort of do not resuscitate processes and things have been enabled by that regular relationship being built up over time through the regular reviews. So then we've got the rest of our hospice services. So we now have on a Tuesday within day services a day where most young adults are allocated if they get referred to the day service. So I think we've got about 5 or 6 young people attending now, so that if they are coming to day services, they're not with a lot of older people, but they have got access to peer support, and we can also plan some activities that are more developmentally appropriate for them. And of course, they can access the MDT as with anyone else. What we have found is the most popular referrals tend to be for complementary therapy, physio, and counselling at the moment. And we're also offering short breaks at the level that we can right now. So we have offered our day unit on weekends when it's not being used as a facilities only short break provision. So we have had some young people, not many, because not everyone has got the packages of care to support this, but if young people have got a 24-hour package or care they can pull together, they can bring their own carers and use the facilities within the day unit where we convert it into a double bedroom, and they can access the bathroom, the kitchen, the sensory room, the gym and the other spaces to stay for a weekend when the rest of the day service is shut. So around supporting this shared care, making sure that we're working in a really sort of planned and joined up way. Every quarter we have a transitional care MDT meeting, which is multi-agency, where we discuss and review all the young people who are in transition and make sure that we're on track and that we're all understanding what our own agenda is. Because the aim is that throughout that 14 to 19 overlap period, that initially children's palliative care taking the lead, and then by 19 that should be handed over, and that the scale should be tipping over into the adult service being the clinical lead. We also do joint person-centred transition planning meetings with young people, and I'll show you that in a minute. And then together, children's and adult hospices attend as many education, health and care planning meetings and child in need meetings together to make sure that we are sharing what is happening and working closely with the other agencies during that transition time. We've also had the opportunity to have joint clinical supervision together. So it's less frequent than it was initially, and we now have it every other month or every quarter with a clinical psychologist. And that's been really helpful to enable the children's hospice, hospital staff and adult hospice staff to come together and reflect and develop that openness and honesty that perhaps is harder to achieve when you're working with colleagues that aren't from your own organisation. Because we feel that we have kind of stepped out and done new things together. Sometimes can be risky or a bit nerve-wracking, and we need to be brave together, but we need to be able to share how we feel things are going and make sure we're building that team. So we use that as a really safe place for reflective practice, and also to sort of generate things that we need to do to keep improving the service. So this is an example of our person-centred planning tool. It's a bit squashed in on the screen, but we use this to meet with young people. And we used to find that when we did children's hospice and adult hospice transition planning meetings, that often the meetings were quite dominated by the parents' burden of coordinating transition, and they would just be sharing problem after problem and stress that the whole family were experiencing during transition, which we completely empathise with and understand and want to support. But what we found was that when it came to asking young people about what their goals were and what their hopes were as they were reaching adulthood, all of that stress and difficulties kind of squash their dreams, and they almost daren't say what they would hope for the future because it just seemed like one thing too many. So what we found is we now offer these to those who can engage with this process and want to, and we offer the young people the opportunity to be in these meetings on their own or with their parents And quite a lot of them actually choose to have this space on their own and then invite their parents in at the end and present it. So we actually start right on the right-hand side with the dream. This gets projected up on the wall, and then we annotate pictures and words and things all over it on the whiteboard, and then bring it into some kind of plan. So we start with the dream, and we ask them to talk about their future plans, and then we work backwards to think about what are we going to need to enable that dream, and how are we going to get the right support and services in place in transition. So looking at that pentagon of support, and then looking at a sense of timescale and who we need to enrol in the action plan that are going to enable those dreams to become a reality. And so we found those a lot more effective, enabling young people to be engaged in their transition plan. Another little picture of us all out at bowling. And just to mention that when we've been running our young adult group, we have actually had fairly regular, at least once or twice a year, community groups engage with us. So this is a group of young apprentices from a local corporate company who have helped to sponsor some of our activities. But they've come along for the night, and they've been mixed up in teams for bowling and really gotten to know the young people. And one of the things we found is our young people have really enjoyed being given the opportunity to meet other young people from different areas of the community. We've also done this with our local football club, who sent their 18 to 23 sort of academy players and reserve teams to come and learn about inclusive sports. And those partnerships have proved really valuable in terms of enjoyable experiences for young people, but also in terms of generating support and funds to keep the group going. So thinking about shared care as a support, and looking back really to the things that are highlighted in research and why we really feel that shared care is the answer to a lot of these issues. So we know that research says there's quite a lot of reluctance to enter transition. And what we found is that people are much more keener and less apprehensive about accepting a referral to the adult service if it doesn't mean concurrently saying goodbye to the children's service. So they get to engage with us while still benefiting from the service that they've known and loved for that time. We've also feel that the lack of trust, which often people report when they're in transition, has been really helpful, because young people and their families say to us that they can see that the children's hospice and the adult hospice work really well together, and that we really trust each other and we are like one team. And so for them, that's really instilled a sense of trust and the adult hospice being a safe place because it's being endorsed by the children's services. As we know, there's lots of losses in transition, particularly with those familiar peers and professionals. And what we find with running the services together, there are a lot less goodbyes, so that peer network continues. And also both for staff and for young people and their families, even when they leave the children's hospice at 19, they still get to see the children's hospice and children's ward staff. Some of them now in their late 20s, they are still seeing those staff they used to know when they were a child, because they jointly staff the young adult groups and the open events with us. And so for a lot of people that feels much more natural. As much as we are very boundary professionally, I think we recognise the value of long-term relationships and how it is really valued to still see those who have been really heavily involved with us as young people as we grow into adulthood. A lot of the challenges we hear from other adult hospices is about lack of referrals or small numbers of referrals, and how difficult it is to plan or start a service without there being a justified need. What we found through engaging with each, the children's hospice, is that we've had a kind of guaranteed amount of timely referrals. So whenever we hold our open events, the children's hospice and the hospital will give out invitations and invite all of those who are 14 upwards. And from that, as I said, we always get new referrals. So we have a kind of reliable flow of referrals coming into the service to help us predict what the service needs to be and to keep that service buoyant. As I said before, there's often that worry in adult services about us having a lack of competence and confidence in some of the clinical care skills and the person-centred needs around young adults. By working together, we have had a brilliant opportunity to overlap and receive teaching, training and support that hasn't cost us anything in addition, either in time or in money, but it's just enabled us to shadow each other, to watch and learn and to grow alongside each other. We also know that the challenges are in the different models, as I touched on earlier, and by working together really closely, we're constantly able to reflect and understand each other's models, and then together develop a new model that somehow sits in the middle, that works for this age group and their developmental stage of life. I think one of the other fears with young adults in transition, both the transition work itself can be time consuming, but also the complex needs of young people. Often people worry about the workload that could come with this group of young people. It's often something I hear within our regional action group is being a concern. Actually, by having that 5 years of overlap, you're sharing that workload out, and within us, if we're working really well as a team, we share out different aspects of support, who's going to take on what and take the lead or coordinate or follow things up. And so together that workload is managed much more efficiently together. User involvement has been absolutely critical to how we have developed, and we couldn't have done it without the young people being honest with us. And I think the biggest thing we had to do is, I think sometimes specialist services can be a little arrogant, and I will admit that ourselves. And we had to admit we've got a lot to learn, and that we kind of needed to say, you know, we're not experts here. We're really reliant on you telling us what's going to work and being willing to listen. So we have regular user involvement groups with parents and carers. We have an annual Tell Us What You Think night to help review the exchange group in itself and to reflect back on what's worked and what hasn't, what needs improving, what needs new ideas going forward. And we do that inclusively, so we use lots of different ways for young people to give their feedback. So those with non-verbal communication or learning disabilities as well are given lots of different ways to share their views. And we also have young adult champions who take a particular role in getting involved. So we've got someone this week coming in to look at mood boards for colour schemes for us and helping to represent the views of young people in different forums along the way. So our future ambition at the moment, we're looking at starting a new Saturday provision. So we're dropping for more families who some who find it hard to come off an evening or too tired at the end of the day, and also for those that want to travel from further afield to learn about the service we're trying to develop. We are also developing shared training and education with our partners across the region to develop a much sort of tighter pathway of training up around individual young adult needs, as well as developing a knowledge and skills framework for young adult care that we want to be able to share with others. And we also have a short break ambition, and that actually will be an extension of shared care for the Children's Hospice, so that as and when we're able to pilot and develop that service, each of the Children's Hospice have agreed in principle that from 18 to 19 in the last year of Children's Hospice short break, they would deliver those short breaks with us on the adult site, so that seamless transfer of short break care can be achieved as well. So just to finish really on our regional ambition, we have recognised the challenge of small numbers that's well documented and that we regularly hear about. And we know that for some services, you are going to have to bring larger numbers together to really justify and enable an effective and efficient service. So that includes regional short break provision that we hope to be able to achieve for East Anglia here at St Elizabeth. And we also recognise that young people want to have their world opened up a little bit. So we're hoping that as more sort of adult hospices established in different social groups, that we can have a slightly bigger regional social network and do bigger get-togethers, and both in terms of virtual forums, but also in terms of big meetups and events together. So part of us looking at how we're going to fund all of this work ongoing, as well as our regional ambition, we have developed a young adult hospice brand. It's called Zest. This is going to enable us to have new shops, events and fundraising initiatives to raise money to support this young adult element of our service here at St Elizabeth. That will also enable us to take out our fundraising initiatives to the regional area, but obviously there are other adult hospices, and we don't want what we're doing for young adults to be confused with the adult hospice provision. And it's also to help us to get out there and raise and campaign for the needs of young people with palliative care needs, and that trying to tackle the invisible population, that we hope that people will see these events and shocks and come and reveal themselves and or they know people in their communities, so that we can get a bigger picture of and a better picture of what's happening in the region in terms of need, and how we can help young people to find services that they're going to need. So in summary, our kind of motto is share care is your best friend. We've certainly been braver together. It's helped us enormously when we've had to start with a cost-neutral service to share resources and share the load, so to speak. It's also really helped us being prepared for what's to come. We're regularly getting projected numbers of the caseloads just behind the transition age group from the Children's Hospice and within the hospital. It really helps us to kind of consider the future of our service. And we also know that it's key to progress going forward. So anything we do together, anything we do new in the future, we'll be doing it together as well. We do run developing transitional care service workshop training days. We are due to settle on another date coming up. We have to rearrange one for March. So if anyone is interested in hearing any more about our service and how we've evolved to where we are now and what our plans are, you may get in touch with me if you like. I'll share my email address here, and you can be in touch and we can try and get you booked onto one of those days. Okay, that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen. And we'll just leave that slide up for a little bit longer so people can make a note. But just a reminder that these will be available on our website in a couple of days once we've edited it down. Thank you, really informative. And people listening in, do start submitting questions through the chat facility on the bottom right of your screen. While people are having a think about what they might want to say, I just wanted to ask if there was one ingredient, Helen, that the service couldn't live without, what would it be?
Well, that is a very good question. I think it's, I mean, obviously I've been talking about it the whole time, but the joined upness, doing things together, because I don't think we could have done what we've done if we weren't working with the Children's Hospice and the ward staff. So I think the key ingredient for us is anything that we've done is doing it in partnership and doing that together from the start rather than it being an add-on later on. So that it is very much a joint venture and owned and shared together.
Thank you. Any questions from those on the call? I've got 4 questions, but hopefully I won't have to ask them all. But I was just wondering how the other adult hospices in the region are engaging with the process, because I know you've got the Eastern RAG as well, so they're well engaged, but the catchment of each is obviously broader than the catchment of St Elizabeth Hospice. Yeah. So how does that work if it makes more sense for a young person to actually access respite at a different adult hospice? Could you? Yeah,
sure. So so the transition leader each and myself, we are trying to help each replicate the model that they developed with us to the other adult hospices that they work with within their area. So and they're at various different stages. I think there are 2 which are looking to develop kind of a shared provision, starting with open events and then possible social groups as well. And then those that are sort of not quite at that stage, and we've been visiting together and talking about the model and how it can work. And in some areas, potentially looking, depending on the geography, at adult hospices joining up together and working with each to look at what could be possible to do, working as sort of 2 adult hospices together, perhaps for a social provision. as well.
Thank you. I can't see any more chat questions coming in. My third question was referring to the slide about the list of hospice services. You mentioned you offered counselling. To what extent are those services offered to the whole family, so maybe to parents or siblings, or is it for the young adults themselves primarily?
It's for the whole family. So at the moment, it's been most popular with young people themselves who have asked for that. So yeah, I think that we have had parents access that as well. And so sometimes that will be counselling, or it could be music or art therapy. But mainly, I think it's been the young people first, parents second. Siblings, I think we've been getting to know quite a lot of siblings, particularly with the view that they would be more likely to accept that support if we already are known with familiar face-to-face. And we have a couple of siblings who have said it's good to know, and they'll let us know as and when they would like it. But so yeah, a bit of a mixture really, but it is open to all.
Thank you. And I think we're a few minutes early, but I'd just like to thank Helen once again for giving up her time and preparing this presentation for you all to join us today. And I think we're going to call this an end. So many thanks. Goodbye.